Good morning, all of you. So, today we are going to discuss your fifth topic, which is your second last topic, that is visualizing the nation. So, when we say that our country is special to us, we should have a patriotic feeling towards our country. The feeling does not arise or does not take birth in us till we do not see it in a pictorial form. Like if you see in India, we have Bharat Mata. ठीक है, हमारी भारत माता जैसे ही हम अपने कंट्री को इमेजिन करते हैं, वी इमिजिएटली थिंक ऑफ अ लेडी हु इज represented as Bharat Mata by our artist. Okay, so this Bharat Mata portrait of Bharat Mata was made, or you can say the allegory of Bharat Mata was made during the independent struggle when our India was fighting against the foreign rule. Okay, so then it was that time that visualization of our nation was given to us. So similarly, when countries in Europe, when they were fighting for their independence, it was very, very necessary for them to visualize their nation. So let us see what is all in this topic. While it is easy enough to represent a ruler through a portrait or a statue, how does one do about giving a face to a nation? Artists in 18th and 19th century found a way out by personifying a nation. In other words, they represented a country as if it was a person. Okay, so how you have more feeling towards towards a person, towards something that you can see, than towards something that you cannot see. So what artists at that time they decided that it is very, very important that we should give a we should personify our nation. Okay, we should give it a image or visualization of a person, and definitely it's human nature that we get attached more to a person than to a non-living thing. In other words, they represented a country as if it was a person. Nations were being portrayed as a female figures. The female form that were chosen to personify the nation did not stand for any particular woman in real life. Rather, it sought to give the abstract idea of nation a concrete form. That is, the female figure became an allegory of the nation. So, how they started portraying nation by a female figure. So if you see in India also, a female figure, that is your Bharat Mata, is portrayed, or you can say it's a personification of your country. Okay, so female is somebody whom both male and female can connect to, like your mother. If the boys or the girls, they all have attachment towards mother. So it's the most easy form to generate love in either male or female. That's why they started using the female form, and that was termed as the allegory of the nation. Allegory basically means a portrait of a nation, or the personification of the nation. You'll recall during the French Revolution, artists used the female allegory to portray the idea such as liberty, justice, and republic. So, if you remember, in your class 9th, on the very first page, Frederick Surio's painting was given, where a female stands with the torch of liberty in her hand. So again, there was a female figure. So there were certain symbols also that you read, political symbols in class 9, where a woman is lying down, a woman is blindfolded. So most of the places, wherever personification was required, they started using female figure. These ideas were represented through specific objects or symbols. As you would remember, the attribute of liberty are the red cap or the broken chain, while justice is generally a blindfolded woman carrying a pair of weighing scales. Understood? So this is how portrait, or you can say allegory, is represented. Blindfolded woman is represented as justice, which is even used today, where the lady stands with a a beam balance in her hand, and she's blindfolded. One more thing. Generally, people think that this blindfold means that the way it is shown in the movies, or you can say the wrong idea that is being circulated in the society, that kanun andha hota. It's not that. What this blindfold means is that The statue of justice is not able to see who stands in front of it. Rather, it listens to all the fair and unfair things and then takes decision without being partial. So this it's not, it cannot, it has got no vision. Okay, now similar female allegories were invented by artists in 19th century to represent the nation. In France, she was Christian Maronet, a popular Christian name, which underlined the idea of people's nation. So in France, when they used the allegory, they called it as Christian Maronet. So at that time, this was a very popular name. So how in India, when you say somebody as Sita, it definitely means that somebody who is very sober, very gentle. When you call somebody as Durga, it means that somebody who can change its form according to the situation. If she's angry, she'll become Kali. So this is how in our country, with the names of our goddesses, we have an idea about them. So similarly in France, the Christian Maronet was one of the very popular Christian name, and here it underlined the idea of people's nation. People's nations, nation means country. They wanted to declare themselves as an independent nation. Her characteristics were drawn from those of liberty and republic. So how was her characteristics? Her characteristics were drawn from the liberty and republic. The red cap, the tricolor, the cockade. So these all things she wore. She wore a red cap, a tricolor, and she had a cockade. Cockade, the cocks they have on their head, that red thing. So that. The statues of Marinette were erected in the public square to remind the public of the national symbols of unity and to persuade them to identify with it. Marinette image was marked on coins and stamps. So the concept behind this was, the more you see, the more you remember. So on all the public places, the image of Christian Marinette was erected. It was the images were marked on the coins and stamps, so that at that time people wrote letters. They would use coin in their everyday life. So the more they would say, the more the concept of people's nation would generate in them. Similarly, Germania was the allegory of German nation. In visual representation, Germania wore a crown of oak leaves, as German oak stands for heroism. So, sorry. So see here, she is Germania. Germania, if you see, she is wearing an oak leaf on her head, crown of oak leaf. And oak leaf represented what? It represented, or it stands for heroism. So here some of the meanings of these symbols are given, which are very important. So just learn these, or memorize it. Like attribute is significance, broken chain is being free. So breastplate with eagle is symbol of German Empire, that is strength. Crown of oak leaf is heroism. Sword, readiness to fight. Olive branch around the sword, willingness to make peace. Black, red, and gold tricolors, flag of liberal nationalists in 1848, banned by the dukes of German states. Ray of rising sun, beginning of new era. So if you see here, these all things are given, and what does they symbolize, all that meaning is given. So now see here Germania is her picture is used in a different way. If you see over here, Germania is a picture portrays, or it represents something that is very sober, something that is very gentle, and she is ready to make peace. She is not somebody who is very furious, or who is very ready to show her heroism. Whereas in the other picture, immediately it has been shown as Germania, something that is somebody who is ready to go for a war. Okay, so that showed the readiness to fight, that people in Germany are all set and all ready to fight, and if it requires, they are ready to go for a war. Now, nationalism and imperialism. Now, what does the word nationalism means? I've always said you that when LISM or ISM is used in end of the word, it means the idea of something. So idea of a nation is nationalism, love towards idea of making somebody under you, taking somebody or dominating some under dominated country. is imperialism. Like India, in India also, who were the imperialistic powers in India? The British. Okay, whether India was ruled by many other European power, but maximum of the portion in India was under Britishers. So they were the imperial power. Now let us see. By the last quarter of 19th century, nationalism no longer retained its idealistic, liberal, democratic sentiments of the first half of century, but became a narrow creed with the limited ends. During this period, nationalist groups became increasingly intolerant to each other and even ready to go to war. The major European powers, in turn, manipulated the nationalist aspiration of subject peoples in Europe to further their own imperialistic aim. So where it is not only about this place, it is not only about other country, but in our country also, when nationalism was first introduced to people, everybody interpreted in their own way. Okay, like what zamindars they felt when it was said that country will belong to you. Zamindars felt that now we can extract more income, we can extract more revenue from the peasants. Whereas peasants they felt that अब हमें जमीन दे दी जाएगी, we'll get land for farming. Whereas the plantation workers they started feeling that now we'll be able to move freely in and out of the plantation area. So whenever a new concept is introduced or whenever a new thing is introduced in the society, people interpret it according to their own understanding. Like few days back I was listening to this thing in the news that people asked with some of the illiterate reporters asked with some of the illiterate people that what is Corona. So immediately they said that Corona is a festival. So people interpret it the way they want it or the way their knowledge depicts. Okay, जितनी उनकी knowledge होती है उसके हिसाब से वो judge करते हैं. Okay, now let us see. But what the European powers they started doing is European powers they started manipulating it. यूरोपियन पावर मैनिपुलेट करते थे ताकि वो जो कंट्रीज विच आर अनअवेयर, ऐसी कंट्रीज जिनके पास अवेयरनेस नहीं है, उन्हें आराम से वो अपने कंट्रोल में ला सके. दे कैन ब्रिंग देम, दे कैन फुलफिल देयर इंपीरियलिस्टिक एम्स. The most serious source of imperialist nationalist tension in Europe after 1871 was the area called the Balkans. So, your Balkans is very, very important. It has already come many times in your board exam. So, Balkan is the way in India you read about the tripartite struggle. ओके, इट्स वेरी सिमिलर टू दैट. बहुत सारे जैसे इंडिया में आपने पढ़ा था ना कि राष्ट्रकूटाज और ये सब जो उस समय के रूलिंग पीपल थे, दे वांटेड टू कंट्रोल द प्लेस. सो सिमिलरली हियर ऑल्सो कनौज, यहाँ कनौज के लिए इंडिया में हुई थी और यहाँ बाल्कन्स के लिए हुई थी. सो बाल्कन वॉज वन सच कंट्री दैट हैड गॉट one such place that was geographically and politically and in the form of resource very, very strong. So most of the European powers they wanted to get control over it, control over Balkans. Balkan was a region of geographical and ethnic variation comprising modern-day Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Greek, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, and Montenegro. So whose inhabitants were broadly known as slaves. So this place comprised of many small countries and collectively their resident inhabitants were known as slaves. A large part of Balkans were under the control of Ottoman Empire. So Ottoman Empire, if you remember Turkey, so most of the parts of Balkan was under the Turkish control. The spread of the idea of romantic nationalism in Balkans together with the disintegration of the Ottoman Empire made this region very explosive. So the idea of romantic nationalism in Balkans and the idea of Ottoman Empire, two conflicting ideas came together and this region became very, very explosive. Romantic nationalism stood for blind love for one's country, a situation where people could not think what is right or what is wrong. They had an ultimate trust and belief that I have to make my country independent. So it made this region very, very explosive. Although the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire had sought to strengthen itself through modernization and internal reforms, but with very little success. So Ottoman Empire, it started strengthening itself by modernization and internal reforms. अपने अंदर अपने आइडियाज में अपने जो उनकी थ्योरीज थे उसमें उन्होंने चेंजेस लाए, कुछ मॉडर्नाइजेशन लाए. बिकॉज इफ यू सी ऑटोमन एम्पायर एट दैट टाइम वाज वेरी वेरी रिजिड. Islam, they followed Islam, and that was very very rigid. So they started bringing some modernization so that people would be tolerant towards their religion. But this did not bring lots changes, because this they were doing to only pretend. This they were not what they felt. So this brought them very little success. One by one, in European nationalists broke away from its control and declared independence. So now one by one, जितने भी यूरोपियन सब्जेक्ट्स थे जो यूरोपियन कंट्रोल के अंडर में थे, उन्होंने खुद को यूरोपियन पार्ट से डिसइंटीग्रेट करके एंड दे डिक्लेयर्ड देमसेल्फ इंडिपेंडेंट. The Balkans people based their claims for independence or political rights on nationalists and used history to prove that they had once been independent but had subsequently been subjugated by the foreign power. Hence, the rebellious nationalists in Balkan thought of their struggle as attempt to win back their long lost independence. So, connect it with India. जब इंडिया की या इंडिपेंडेंस स्ट्रगल स्टार्ट हुई थी, तो हमारे नेशनलिस्ट जो थे उस समय, जो हमारे नेशनलिस्ट लीडर्स थे या हमारे जो फ्रीडम फाइटर्स थे, दे टू टेल अबाउट द रिच हेरिटेज ऑफ इंडिया. ऐसे सिचुएशन में जब लोग किसी फॉरेन डोमिनेंस के अंडर में हैं, अगर आप बताते हैं दैट हमारे पास्ट में हमारी कंट्री इतनी डेवलप्ड थी, हमारी कंट्री इंडिपेंडेंट थी, सो these things inspire people, and this gives strength to the people. So similar thing was done by the freedom fighters in Balkans also. They started telling that Balkans was once upon a time, it was an independent nation. So the people of Balkans, they started fighting, and what they felt that their fight was not to get independent but to bring back their long lost independence. Once they were independent, and we need to bring back that independence. As the different Slavic nationalists struggle to define these identity and independence, the Balkan area became an area of intense conflict. Balkan states were fiercely jealous of each other, and each hoped to gain more territory at the expense of others. So one problem what they felt was that Balkans were always being hit by the European powers. European power भी control करना चाहते थे. And I've said you earlier also that Balkan was a combination of many small kingdoms. और ये जो kingdoms थे, ये भी खुद में लड़े जा रहे थे. Okay, so there was lack of unity. There was no unity in Balkans, and since there was lack of unity, that gave an opportunity, or you can say that paved a way for the European powers to enter. और इतने वो greed में थे अपनी territory को expand करने के लिए, that they started fighting among themselves rather than fighting from the European powers. Now, matters were further complicated because the Balkans also became the scene of the big power rivalry. So big power rivalry, that means the big European powers, they also started fighting to gain control over Balkans. During this period, there was an intense rivalry among the European powers over trade and colonies, as well as naval and military might. So they were fighting for trade, ट्रेड के लिए नए किंगडम्स, अपने नई कंट्रीज अपने किंगडम के अंडर ला रहे थे ताकि उनकी ट्रेड एक्सपैंड करे. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट दे वर मेकिंग कॉलोनीज, लाइक इंडिया वाज मेड वन ऑफ द यूरोपियन कॉलोनी. ओके, दे वर फाइटिंग फॉर नेवल एंड मिलिट्री माइट. वो नेवल पार अपनी नेवल नेवी, इफ यू नो, नेवी को स्ट्रॉन्ग करने के लिए, मिलिट्री को स्ट्रॉन्ग करने के लिए, बिकॉज दे फेल्ट दैट ज्यादा टेरिटरी वो तभी अपने कंट्रोल में ला सकते हैं इफ दे हैव अ वेरी गुड मिलिट्री एंड अ वेरी गुड navy. They wanted to build a strong army. These rivalries were very evident in the way Balkans problem unfolded. Each power, Russia, Germany, England, Austro-Hungary, were keen on countering the hold of other powers over the Balkan. So ये सारे जो थे जर्मनी, रशिया, इंग्लैंड, ऑस्ट्रो हंगरी, ये सारे एक दूसरे को डिफीट करना चाह रहे थे, एंड दे वांटेड टू कंट्रोल बाल्कन्स. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट, जो जितने इंटरनली जो कंट्रीज थे लाइक रोमानिया, यूगोस्लेविया, ये सब जो कंट्रीज थे, ये भी खुद में लड़े जा रहे थे। बाल्कन्स के जो कंट्री थे, बाल्कन के टेरिटरी के अंडर जो कंट्रीज आती थी, वो भी खुद में लड़ रहे थे टू एक्सपैंड देयर एम्पायर। ओके, over the Balkans and extended its own control over the area. This led to series of war in the region and finally the First World War. So these all led to the First World War. बाल्कन के ऊपर अपनी सुप्रीमेसी और धीरे धीरे अपनी ट्रेड कॉलोनीज एक्सपैंड करने के चक्कर में that ended in the First World War. So your First World War started in 1914 and it ended in 1918. Nationalism, aligned with imperialism, led Europe to disaster in 1914. So 1914, that is the beginning of First World War. So First World War was very disastrous because I've always said you that war is not only loss of life, not only loss of property, but also loss of life. बहुत सारे कर्ज हो जाते हैं, लोग मरते हैं. Okay, so this brings an absolute destruction. But meanwhile, many countries in the world which had been colonized by the European power in 19th century began to oppose imperial dominance. So it was not that European countries were fighting only in the First World War. Rather, जितनी भी कंट्रीज को उन्होंने अपनी कॉलोनीज बनाई थी, इवन दे वर फाइटिंग अगेंस्ट द यूरोपियन पावर. लाइक इफ यू सी इन 1914, the date in India, if you see, in India also there were many struggles that had already started. हमारे इंडिया में 1857 से ही मंगल पांडे की सिपॉय म्यूटनी से ही ये फर्स्ट वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस स्टार्ट हो चुका था. सो बाय 1914 इवन इन इंडिया बहुत सारे स्ट्रगल्स, बहुत सारी events हो रही थी. महात्मा गांधी was about to come to India. So there were many events that was taking place in इंडिया एज वेल. और जो भी कंट्रीज ब्रिटिश डोमिनेंस या किसी भी यूरोपियन पावर के डोमिनेंस के अंडर में थी, वो सारी उनसे लड़ना स्टार्ट कर दी थी टू बिकम फ्री. The anti-imperial movements that developed everywhere were nationalist in the sense that they all struggled to form independent nation states and were inspired by the sense of collective national unity forced in the confrontation with the imperialism. So ये जितनी भी लड़ाइयाँ हो रही थी, that clearly represented that all these nations were fighting to become independent. They wanted to gain independence over the imperial powers. European idea of nationalism now here replicated from the for peoples everywhere developed their own specific variety of nationalism. But the idea that society should be organized into nation state came to be replaced as a natural and universal. So nationalism thi, and what people they started feeling that concept of nation state, that means concept of country, dividing people on the basis of country, was acceptable by the nature, and that was universal. Nobody had right, even if you are strong, you do not have right to bring supremacy, or you do not have right to suppress any country. That being suppressed was not natural, it was unnatural and non-universal. Rather, declaring themselves as being a nation state, a country, was natural and universal. So this was all about your first chapter, that is Rise of Nationalism. Now what you're supposed to do is do all these question answers so that I can check. But I think if chapter is very clear, that I give very less from the back. It will be more from the middle and start. But write these question answers. Thank you so much.